Okay, let's talk about mechs. At this point, you guys should have seen all the robotic build minions and are probably wondering, with all this war tech, where are the mechs? Actually, I think most of us were saying, man, I am glad there are no new mechs coming. Well, this week we'll be focusing on the brand new mechs coming out with Immortal Vanguard. Before we dive into the spoilers, we have a few mech changes we'd like to make with the expansion, including changes to MechaZor itself, and a change to how the process of completing MechaZor works in-game. These changes will allow us to better integrate mechs into Duelist, and allow us to create new, exciting cards to enhance your mech arsenal. MechaZor updates. The chassis of MechaZor. A little quid pro quo before we actually talk about this card is that this card was probably the worst mech out of all of them. Typically, its spell immunity wasn't enough to compensate for its bad stat line. 4 health for 4 mana, no matter the damage attack value, is typically pretty not valuable, right? 5 mana for the next opponent or on your opponent's next turn, 6 mana, etc. That's like Lava Slasher, Immolate, Mechander, all of those combos that make this like super vulnerable. Even though it progressed mech, if you didn't actually get MechaZor out, then your opponent could remove it and do damage to you simultaneously quite frequently. So the other mechs are better because they're cheaper and they're less threatening, like they're less punishing, right? Like if you spam them. Whereas this eats up all of your mana. So that's just something to think about before we talk about it. But the changes are, it's going from a 5/4, cannot be targeted by any spells, to Force Field 2/4. Removed, cannot be targeted by any spells, gained Force Field. Stats changed from 5/4 to 2/4. That's pretty significant. First off, that card, is fairly weak now. 4 mana, 2/4 Force Field. It does make it inner focusable in Mech Songhai decks, but I don't know how much that'll do anything. It's weak. That makes all of the mechs so far revealed weak to Plasma Storm. What else? Not much else there. It's also just, it can be removed by a lot more stuff now. Well, the idea, Ambir, is MechaZor is a sum of all of its parts. So it got the spell immunity from the chassis, and with changing chassis, would you rather this was a 5/4 Force Field? No. They wanted to keep the theme of MechaZor, and they already know that this card was played the least, and it's an epic, and it's a mech. So, they wanted this change to affect something that's probably not... it's better to nerf this thing that wasn't seeing play anyways. This card was never seeing play. It was a 2 of, if anything, if you're going to run it. Otherwise, most budget mech decks to begin with don't play it because it's just a waste of spirit. So, I'd rather they took this value off of it. It'd feel very underwhelming. No, it has to be a 2/4. Force Field is oppressive as hell. Force Field is oppressive as all hell, dude. It has Force Field. You can buff that. So it's actually stronger than its old counterpart as a minion in general because of the Force Field. However, its attribution to the spell immunity, which has been taken away from MechaZor, is significant. This is stronger than this because it's not removed by Holy Immolate without hitting it first. Does that make sense? That translates to more board presence, even if the attack value is lower. Alright, now the big mech itself is going through several changes. Removed, cannot be targeted by any spells. gained Force Field. Changed from an 8/8 to 6/6. Mana cost reduced from 7 to 4. So it's not said why this is important here, but we'll get to that. This means if you bounce it to their hand with cards like Hailstone Prison and the Vitruvian bounce card, Sandswirl Reader, it's a 4 mana. Also, we'll get to why it's important later. If it comes off of Zor, that means it's a 4 mana 6/6. It's pretty impressive for 4 mana. I wonder if it shouldn't be 5 mana due to the new ways to actually play the card itself. I feel like that'd be slightly more fair, since you can play this and another oppressive 4-drop on the same turn and probably crush. This is huge. There are so many cards that can target this now. Like, literally anything can target it. You know, you can whip it with Demonic Lure. I mean, you can punish it technically if you can pop the Force Field. You can Blood of Air, which is huge. You can let's see, you can't use Sunset Paragon on it now unless you pop its Force Field, which feels bad. You can Thumping Wave, Natural Select, Egmorph. I mean, it didn't really change for Lionar. They have Sunbloom, but now I guess they can Martyrdom it straight up if they want to. It's probably not that good, but it can be straight up Aspect of Shimzard now versus Chromatic Cold Aspect of Shimzar. You can still Chromatic Cold it for pretty significant, value. There's a lot of things that can do with this that you can do to it now that make mech techs less important and makes it less oppressive in general if it comes out very early, because a lot of early game solutions that weren't, ephemeral shroud chaining and stuff like that could have potentially answered it in the past. However, it had such, it being immune to spells was pretty big. However, the biggest change I think, and we'll talk about it here. Have you ever felt weird playing more mech cards after they've destroyed your MechaZor? Another change we're doing is allowing you to deploy multiple MechaZors. After your MechaZor build reaches 100%, subsequent cards that build MechaZor will contribute to the process of another MechaZor. Now every time you hit 100% build progress, a new MechaZor is ready to hit the battlefield. So now you can play multiple mechs. Now 15 mechs in a deck actually has purpose. So in the past there was never a point, but now 15 mechs, you can potentially summon it 3 times. So, there is that. Likelihood of summoning it more than once is fairly low, since you usually tend to replace your mechs by that point. But it's there. So there's also, I think this is overall very healthy for the game. I'm slightly scared of getting spammed with multiple mechs due to RNG. But we'll see. It's way more fair. It's way less oppressive if mech comes out like that. So really good change. We'll see when this change goes through. Apparently it's coming out with Immortal Vanguard, so there's not going to be a separate patch for it. But I'm feeling pretty good about it. How about you, chat? What do you guys think? Yay or nay? Yay or nay, chat? Yay or nay? Vote yeah, vote yeah. I don't see any nays. Alterex still not viable. Yeah, I'm not sure if he'd be more viable. Yeah, I think it's a good change too. We'll see. All right. Let me grab the reveals here. Nightmare Operant. 2 mana, 3/2 mech. However, okay, well, we'll just read it. Dying Wish, shuffle a MechaZor into your deck. That's pretty scary. Abyssian has become fairly able to cycle. Fairly proficient at just like cycling cards through their deck. And I don't know, this is... Well, I don't think anyone expected what happened at Worlds to happen, the Moon King. Nobody expected that to happen. Nobody ever would have thought in a 5-deck best of 7 series that someone would bring 5 mech decks. Dying Wish, shuffle a MechaZor into your deck. So the important part here is they can cycle their deck and potentially get one out. However, that's just the upside. That this is a minion that can be played in place of like Ooze. Like, I think this could be played in most Abyssian decks, just for that matter, and probably be fine with it as a card. It's a 2 mana 3/2 that, gives you a 4 mana OP card randomly. You might never see it. It might never come into effect, but hey, it might work. It's kind of crazy to think about it that in a non-mech deck, this could just be a staple 2-drop. The good part about this card, though, is that in a normal mech deck, this doesn't increase the progress for mech. So you can't play this and, increase your mech progress and then draws, and then also gives you an extra MechaZor. So it's just a 2-drop. I like the approach to this more than I think people will in the long run, because I was really sick of the 2-drops for Abyssian being either mega oppressive or extremely bad. Like, Ooze became extremely bad, right? In most cases for Thunderhorn. Like, I've punished so many nerds with Thunderhorn when they just played it. They like ooze, they like turn to ooze. Like, I open up 2-drop, then they go ooze, and then I'm like Thunderhorn, and then they go, oh. But it's, killing this minion is so punishing. You realize it's not into their hand, right? It goes into their deck as a 1-of. Like, it's randomly drawn. If they draw it, then yeah, that sucks. But it's fairly low odds. By stepping onto the mana tile with my minion and then playing a Thunderhorn. Well, punish isn't really a vulnerability because you can't ping off force field and then punish. You have to ping, punish. And you have to do that only with Blood Tier. So I think Blood Tier is going to be a staple in Cassiva. I'm just saying. Use Smart. Same. In a Lurking Fear deck, this is kind of funny. You can argue that you could thin out certain Lurking Fear cards and maybe draw into it. This is also the first card in Duelist history that adds cards to your deck. Straight up. So deck manipulation is something that they've clearly worked on implementing into the game, which is just, as a mechanic, is exciting because that means that we can look forward to more cards that do things to your deck, which I'm all for because it means more modes of play, more deck archetypes, more styles, potentially mill decks down the road with deck manipulation, because we have never interacted with the opponent's decks outside of drawing cards. So we'll see how this matters in the future if this is something that they explore. So I think that even if like, let's say I lose a game first day of the patch, someone plays Nightmare Operant, I kill it, and then they play MechaZor the next turn and I lose because they replaced into it. Like, sure, okay, damn, that sucks. But this mechanic, putting something into the deck and not just my action bar, is pretty cool. So Desolator should have this shuffle mechanic, to be honest. I agree. Desolator should shuffle back into their deck, not their hand. I agree.